So I was going through Twitter and Reddit the other day and kept seeing a theme come up over and over again. People just find Novak Djokovic's game boring. Mixed in against the backdrop of the usual conversation about the Serb was this overriding sentiment that people don't necessarily hate the player from a tennis perspective. In fact, they found his achievements incredible, but they really, really disliked the game. Let's leave the personal stuff about the player aside because that's been covered to death at this point. And let's try and figure out why people don't really find the game particularly interesting. And more importantly, why that game style helps him be an all-time great on a tennis court. This is Open Era. I'm Simon Bushell. A few weeks ago, I stumbled on the thoughts of Maverick Tennis. You can find his interviews on the channel of a previous guest of Open Era, Tennis Nerd, and there was something within his writing which really struck a chord with me. It was something which I sort of intrinsically knew, but could never quite put into coherent thought. You are exactly what you practice.
It took enormous amount of mental and emotional energy to really keep it tight, keep my focus. And people around me who have been with me have done a great job in making me do my routines in a proper way so that I could, try to perform the best way possible.
Novak Djokovic is nothing but consistent because that's precisely what he practices. Maverick Tennis goes into extreme depth about a technique called box drilling. This is hardly a new concept. If you've ever been down to a local junior court, you will have seen cones being placed out on the court as target practice. But Djokovic takes box drilling to a whole nother level. By breaking the back of the court down into fours, 2 on the ad and 2 on the deuce, you force the targets to be smaller. Break them up into 8s, and you're able to hone the craft. Break them into 16th, and you gain laser-like precision with your shots.
Oh, stop it! Novak Djokovic, what are you doing? That is outrageous!
By hand-feeding balls, your aim is to hit these targets over and over again from different positions on the court. And by training, you get repeatability. But yeah, being precise with your shots, cool. But what exactly are you supposed to do with that information? Well, tennis is an interesting sport because the way it's been presented to the audience is still largely narrative-based around mental stability on court, desire and passion along with a will to win. But like every other sport in the world, we've seen a revolution and an explosion in data available to players, professionals and support staff. And what this does is it allows the study of how exactly points are won in tennis, how goals are scored in football, and how the ball goes in the basket in basketball. Even snooker isn't immune to this. Match play snooker has been alluded to as an old man's game, the kind of thing that you do to an up-and-comer just to mess with them. Turn down all the low percentage shots in favor of high percentage pots and safeties. Sorry for the snooker interlude. Actually, I'm not that sorry. Snooker is awesome, more people should watch it. It does present an interesting point though. What is considered high and low percentage in the sport of tennis? We sort of know the concept of redlining is fraught with danger. What exactly does it mean to start smashing winners left and right? Because tennis has patterns like every other sport, and whether we like it or not, it can be broken down into tiny details. Next time you watch a match, and I mean really watch a match, pick up a paper and pencil and track exactly how a point is won and what happens during a rally. Do this for just 3 games and see if you notice a pattern. It's amazing how quickly things start to show up. For example, player X got pinned in the backhand, and player Y used the open space on the forehand to force an error on the run. This isn't rocket science, we all kind of know this stuff already. But when you have access to large data sets and combine them with an explosive athlete that uses extremely precise practice methods using small box drills, you are able to create an absolute monster.
Not only champion of Australia for a 10th time, but he is the best player on the planet again.
No,
Novak, congratulations. Okay, 7 Australian Opens, 15 slams.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. You cannot complain. You cannot complain.
The patterns are important here. For example, grip changes are an absolute nightmare to navigate if you're inside of a rally with someone at the baseline. If your opponent is constantly trying to put you in a position where you are having to grip change constantly, you will eventually break down. Think of any extreme grip change, and now think of whether that is able to be done at speed on a quick surface. Make sense why Novak Djokovic might be so good on quicker courts? It's not just grip changes though, it's working around the weaknesses in footwork that your opponent has. If you're able to trap your opponent in an area they are not comfortable with, you can move them around and force errors. Let's take box 4. Deep in the backhand side for the right-hander, and a player like Matteo Berrettini. He's a big dude who just struggles to move back and forth on the backhand side laterally. So pull him from box 3 to box 4, back to box 3. Don't just leave the ball sitting happily in the middle of the backhand side as a rally. You have to force the breakdown in the shot. Yes, some dudes will break down without any pressure placed on them, but at the top of the game, those micro movements are enough to make a difference. So, grip changes and micro movements against players' weaknesses, check. How about the exploitation of space? The good old-fashioned change of direction. It will never go out of style. It's funny to me that there's an entire analytics movement in football, and it had to come up with a term for when one dude is better than another in open space. They call this a qualitative overload. That's not a joke, by the way, it's actually true. Leo Messi versus a third division right back isn't just a better player against an inferior one, it's now got a name. I make this point because a decent amount of modern football is about trying to create open space for your better players to attack in. Tennis is no different, except instead of Messi against a right back, it's being trapped in box 4 before the ball rockets past you in box 1.
Oh, tennis from another level from Novak Djokovic.
Those patterns of play in those areas where players lose points can be drilled, and they can be ingrained through practice. Have you ever wondered how Novak Djokovic can look completely dead at the end of one match, only to come back the next day and wipe the floor with a fresher looking opponent? It's basically because he knows exactly how to win points against them. They'll usually have a weakness in technique, or a weakness to a certain pattern of play, switching grips, movement from left to right on short balls, etc. And if you know these things already, you're going to win a lot of points. So, the counter to all of this, of course, is if everyone knows this stuff already, and everyone knows what those weaknesses are, why don't they just overcome them? Of course. Why didn't I think of that? Insert the Hank Scorpio gif from The Simpsons. Some weaknesses just can't be overcome. Physical, for example. In Berrettini's case, he can't get any smaller and more nimble on his backhand side. Some players are able to adjust to those weaknesses, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of drilling. Plus, of course, they need to be aware that it's happening to start with. Some players go the opposite direction, and they go for something called target-based winners. This is a strategy employed very well by someone like Roger Federer. You know your spots you're going to hit, and you train every day to hit those spots. To a lesser extent, this is what Berrettini does as well. Big serve, big forehand into the open court. Hit your spots, impose your will on your opponent, and win points that way. The only trouble, of course, is that Matteo Berrettini is not Roger Federer. And everyone knows what you are doing going into the match and can game plan around those strengths. I'm a huge admirer of Marcelo Bielsa and Pep Guardiola in football. They play a style where literally everyone in the building knows what's coming. It's repeatable, it's beautiful, they impose their style on you. You can only really do that if you have exceptionally good players who are able to carry out those instructions, or you have players who are exceptionally disciplined.
May approach, and don't try this at home.
If neither of those things are true, you're gonna have a bad time. So where does that leave us all? You've practiced this stuff to death. You're on complete autopilot in rallies because you know the weaknesses of your opponent. Really, it kind of makes the mental side of the game quite a bit more straightforward. All you have to do is execute the thing you've done over and over again in training. For example, okay, Stefanos Tsitsipas, he struggles in some areas. He sucks at grip changes. I'll just use that on this point if I have the chance. He struggles moving right to left on the backhand side, so I'll just aim for box 3 and box 4 during a rally, etc., etc. It's another reason why Djokovic is so exceptional in 5-setters. The stats say he's gonna win more points than his opponent using this strategy if the match goes longer. And that's the funny thing. For all the talk of how great Djokovic is physically, and he is, it's the big stuff that takes it out of you more. And his physicality is made a little bit easier by the fact that he's able to read the game so well. Yes, he's incredibly flexible. Yes, he's got an exceptionally quick first step. And yes, his conditioning is excellent. But his defensive ability is as much about knowing where his opponent is hitting the ball and having a plan for it as it is about his own physical makeup.
Well, there will be 2 teams on Sunday, your team and Stefanos' team in the stands, 2 players on the court, and it'll be a rematch of a Roland Garros final. What are your recollections of that match? And let's look ahead and your expectations for the final here on Sunday.
Well, I won that match, so my recollections are very positive.
And just to touch on that defensive ability, and you guessed it, he is aiming for those boxes in his recovery. If he's out of position or stretching, he'll have a point on the court he's aiming for, and he knows that it's a weakness in his opponent's game. It buys you just a few extra seconds, and at the top, a few extra seconds are like gold dust.
Of course, I am motivated to win as many slams as possible. You know, at this stage of my career, these trophies are the biggest motivational factor of why I still compete. So that's the case, without a doubt. Of course, it's a privilege to be part of the discussion of as one of the greatest players of all time. And if people see me this way, of course, it's very flattering, because I know that I give as much as effort and energy into trying to win slams as anybody else.
Target-based tennis, that is, asserting your style onto a match, will break down over a period of time. Analytically speaking, it just will. It's a lower percentage play, except if you're Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. Mind you, if I was telling a junior coming up to just be like Roger and Rafa, it might not go well for their long-term playing career at tournament level. I mean, it will be fun as hell though, so more power to you. It's funny that while writing this, it struck me again and again how great Nadal and Federer are. Being a shot maker is just different. It's effectively being able to hit a shot which is off pattern, or something which is just the lowest expected outcome in a certain situation. Do you know how hard that is? In 2016, the South Korean Go player Lee Se-dol effectively managed to melt down the computer program Alpha AI during a match. He produced a move so wildly out of sequence and character that the computer just noped out and crumbled. Absolute fucking boss. But there is a world where we can love both of these styles. The unexpected is fun, the unexpected is beautiful, the unexpected is romantic, the unexpected is unexpected. But repeatability is its own skill. Not a lesser skill, just a different one. And like it or not, this is the way that all sports are going across the board. Novak Djokovic is maybe the best example of this occurring in real time in front of our eyes. And if you don't like that, well, I've got this to say to you. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
I just met you, and this is crazy.